All right, get ready, because today we are diving deep into a world where magic and futuristic warfare collide. We're taking the first Harry Potter movie, The Philosopher's Stone, and dropping it right into the grim darkness of Warhammer 40K.
Ah, what a fascinating concept.
It is. Just imagine, young Harry navigating the perils of the 41st millennium instead of Hogwarts. How would the familiar elements of his world be twisted and transformed in this brutal setting?
It's that clash between these two universes that really makes this so intriguing. On the one hand, you've got Harry Potter. It's whimsical, it's filled with magic schools and fantastic creatures, a sense of wonder. But then you've got the gritty reality of 40K. Humanity is on the brink of extinction, constantly battling these cosmic horrors. They're clinging to this faith that's as fervent as it is terrifying. It's a completely different tone.
Yeah, it's like mixing oil and water.
Yeah.
They shouldn't mix, but the results, well, they could be absolutely explosive. Let's start with Hogwarts. How would this school, a place of learning and magic, even function in the 40K universe? Could they even train psykers within the Imperium? It seems incredibly risky.
Well, Hogwarts, as we know it, wouldn't last a day in the 41st millennium. Oh no. Imagine it instead as a fortress monastery. Heavily guarded, dedicated to training psykers for the Imperium of Man.
Ooh, I like this already.
Think about it. Towering walls, armed guards, maybe even a few space marines patrolling the grounds. Perhaps a chapter known for their psychic abilities, like the Grey Knights.
So no more friendly ghosts floating around or talking portraits.
Well, the portraits might still talk, but imagine them instead as these stern figures dispensing pronouncements on school policy with the authority of the Emperor himself. And as for the ghosts, well, perhaps they're echoes of psykers who succumbed to the perils of the warp, their tormented souls forever bound to the school.
That's definitely a far cry from nearly headless Nick. But what about Harry himself? How would his magical abilities translate in this new setting?
Harry, with his inherent magical talent, would be immediately recognized as a psyker in the 40K universe, a human with extraordinary psychic abilities. But in the Imperium, psykers, well, they're a double-edged sword.
Yeah, they're definitely a force to be reckoned with.
They're sources of immense power. They can manipulate energy, even bend reality to their will, but they're also incredibly dangerous. They're prone to demonic possession and capable of unleashing catastrophic warp energies if they lose control.
So instead of learning charming spells like Wingardium Leviosa, he'd be training to control these raw, unpredictable powers and resist the temptations of chaos.
Exactly. Picture Harry not in a cozy classroom, but in a rigorous training regime, learning to focus his psychic energies, shield his mind from those demonic intrusions, and maybe even project his will across vast distances. It'd be intense.
That sounds brutal. And what about the Astronomicon? Would that psychic beacon, the one that guides ships through the warp, play a role in Harry's journey?
The Astronomicon. It's essential. Imagine it as a psychic lighthouse, cutting through the treacherous currents of the warp, guiding ships through the Imperium. Reaching Hogwarts in this reimagined universe, well, it would require navigating this chaotic dimension, and the Astronomicon would be their only guide. It'd be a perilous journey.
Speaking of dangerous journeys, Harry can't resist a bit of risk-taking. What about his favorite sport, Quidditch? How would that be transformed in this brutal galaxy?
Aha, oh Quidditch, forget broomsticks. In this version, Quidditch would be a death sport, played on high-speed grav bikes or even those small, nimble flyers the Imperium uses. Just picture it. Players zipping through the air, dodging obstacles, trying to score while avoiding, well, let's just say the bludgers would be a lot more deadly than enchanted balls.
Oh yeah, much more deadly.
Definitely. They'd be more like, well, guided missiles, I'd say.
That's a Quidditch match I wouldn't want to referee. But let's not forget about Harry's dreadful aunt and uncle, the Dursleys. How would their mundane, oh-so-normal lives change in the 41st millennium?
Oh, the Dursleys. Their obsession with normalcy, it would be hilariously out of place in the Imperium. Just imagine them trying to navigate the bureaucratic nightmare of the Adeptus Administratum, drowning in paperwork, living in constant fear of the Inquisition.
It's almost too good to imagine. But, maybe Uncle Vernon would actually thrive in the rigid hierarchy of the Imperium. Imagine him barking orders at underlings, feeling important for the first time in his life.
That's a great point. He might actually revel in a minor position of authority, enforcing all those petty regulations with an iron fist. And Petunia with her disdain for anything abnormal, she would be absolutely horrified by the sheer ubiquity of mutants, psykers, and the ever-present threat of chaos.
This is just the beginning, but I'm already hooked. We've got a heavily fortified Hogwarts training psykers, Quidditch as a death sport, and the Dursleys tangled up in Imperial bureaucracy. What else awaits us in this wild fusion of universes?
Oh, so much more! Welcome back to our deep dive where we're mashing up Harry Potter and Warhammer 40K.
I am loving this.
It's wild, right?
Yeah.
We've turned Hogwarts into this, hardcore psyker training ground, made Quidditch a seriously deadly sport, and even thrown the Dursleys into the bureaucratic chaos of the Imperium.
It's brilliant.
But now, let's get back to Harry. We've established that his magical abilities, well, they'd make him a psyker, right?
Right, a powerful one.
A valuable asset to the Imperium, but also a potential threat.
Definitely a double-edged sword. So, would he be celebrated for these powers or feared?
That's the question that would constantly loom over him in this universe.
Oh, for sure.
On one hand, his power could be seen as a sign of the Emperor's favor, marking him for greatness.
Destined for great things.
But on the other hand, any psyker, especially one as potentially powerful as Harry, would attract the attention of, well, the Inquisition.
Oh, no, the Inquisition. Those guys have a reputation.
They do, don't they?
Not the friendliest bunch.
They are dedicated to rooting out heresy and any threats to the Imperium. And an untrained psyker like Harry, oh, he would definitely raise some eyebrows.
Red flags everywhere.
They might even see him as a weapon to be honed, trained to combat the forces of chaos. Imagine Harry as a psyker inquisitor.
Oh, wow. Fighting demons and purging heretics. That is a far cry from facing Voldemort in a schoolyard duel.
Wouldn't it be?
But what if, and hear me out here, what if Harry, being the rebellious sort, resisted the Imperium's attempts to control him?
Oh, that's an interesting thought. A rogue psyker fighting for survival against both the forces of chaos and the might of the Imperium. That's a story I'd want to read.
Me too.
But let's not forget about his friends. Ron and Hermione, how would they navigate this dangerous new reality?
I was just thinking that.
It's a good question. Ron, with his family's deep ties to the, let's say, magical world, which in this version might be closely aligned with the Imperium.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense.
He could find himself torn between his loyalty to Harry and, well, his duty to the established order.
A real test of friendship.
It would be. And Hermione, with her insatiable curiosity and thirst for knowledge, she might be drawn to the Adeptus Mechanicus.
The Adeptus Mechanicus. Really? They don't seem like Hermione's type.
Why not?
They're intense. Wouldn't her love of logic and reason clash with their, rigid adherence to ritual and dogma?
It would be a fascinating dynamic, for sure. It would be interesting to see how she'd reconcile her own beliefs with the Mechanicus' obsession with technology and their reverence for the machine god. Would she embrace their ways, or would she challenge their narrow view of the world?
You've got me thinking now. I'd love to see that play out. But you know what else I'm curious about? The creatures.
Oh, yes, the creatures.
Imagine Fluffy, the three-headed guard dog from the Philosopher's Stone. In the 40K universe, he wouldn't just be big and scary. He'd be something truly monstrous. Maybe even a demonic entity.
You're right. Imagine Fluffy transformed into a multi-headed beast of the warp, dripping with otherworldly ichor, teleporting between dimensions. Now, that's a guard dog you wouldn't want to sneak past.
No kidding. What other creatures from Harry Potter's world do you think would be completely transformed in this dark setting?
Ooh, good question. Unicorns, those symbols of purity and grace. Well, in 40K, they might become these twisted creatures, their horns imbued with warp energy, their beauty corrupted by chaos.
That's a disturbing image.
It is, isn't it? What about Hagrid, the half-giant gamekeeper? How would he fit in?
Yeah, where would Hagrid find his place in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium?
Well, with his love of dangerous creatures, he'd probably be an outsider even in the 40K universe. Maybe he'd find a kinship with the Ratlings.
Ratlings?
Yeah, those stout abhumans, the ones the Imperial Guard often employs for their sharpshooting skills.
So instead of tending to magical creatures, he'd be wielding a lasgun and fighting in the trenches. That's rough.
It is a bit of a career change. But remember, Hagrid's always been compassionate, fiercely loyal to his friends. Even in the grim darkness of 40K, those qualities could make him a symbol of hope.
A reminder that even facing impossible odds, there's still room for kindness and courage. I like that.
But you...
I do. We've explored the transformations of Hogwarts, Quidditch, the creatures, even the Dursleys. But we can't forget the main villain. What about Voldemort? How would he be reimagined in this setting?
Oh, Voldemort, he'd be something else entirely.
Right, so we're back, and we're wrapping up our deep dive into Harry Potter meets Warhammer 40K.
The ultimate crossover.
It is. We've seen Hogwarts as this fortress monastery, Quidditch turned into this crazy death sport.
Hmm.
Even the Dursleys are caught up in this, like, imperial red tape nightmare.
It's been a wild ride.
But now, let's talk about the big bad himself, Voldemort. How does he fit into this 40K universe?
Voldemort. Oh, he wouldn't just be some dark wizard hanging out in the shadows.
Oh no, he'd be much worse, right?
He'd be a full-on chaos champion.
Like a big deal.
A major player, a conduit of the warp's power, seeking to not just, take over the wizarding world, but to plunge the entire galaxy into darkness.
So, less creepy, noseless dude, more like monstrous being of pure evil.
Exactly. Warp-touched, spewing dark energy, commanding legions of demons, the whole shebang.
Now that's a villain. What about his followers, the Death Eaters? Would they get a 40K makeover too?
Oh, absolutely. Forget those silly masks and robes. We're talking chaos cultists, mutants twisted by the warp, maybe even a few corrupted space marines, tempted by the dark side.
That's an army I would not want to face. But would Voldemort's goals still be the same? Would he be fixated on the wizarding world?
His ambitions would be much, much bigger. The wizarding world, or its 40K equivalent, it'd be a stepping stone. He'd want galactic domination, shatter the Imperium, bring about an age of chaos, the whole enchilada.
So Harry wouldn't just be fighting him at school. This would be like a battle for the fate of the galaxy.
Precisely. The stakes are way higher. We're talking cosmic showdown, good versus evil, light against darkness, the whole chosen one narrative on a galactic scale.
Talk about pressure. But the Imperium, they wouldn't just let Voldemort run wild, would they?
True, the Imperium has a lot of firepower. Space Marines, armies, you name it. But chaos, it thrives on division. It exploits those little cracks in the Imperium's armor.
So Voldemort could, like, turn people against each other.
Absolutely. So discord, manipulate, corrupt. Imagine entire legions of the Imperial Guard turning against the Emperor and joining Voldemort.
That's terrifying. What about the other factions in 40K? How would they react to all this?
Oh, it'd be a mess. The Eldar, with their, shall we say, experience fighting chaos, they might actually team up with the Imperium. Reluctantly, of course.
Makes sense. What about the orcs?
The orcs, they'd probably see it as one giant party, wouldn't they? More fighting, more bloodshed, they'd be all for it.
Those guys love a good fight. What about the Necrons? Those ancient robot guys. Wouldn't they just, like, watch everything burn?
The Necrons, they're a wild card. Who knows what they're really thinking? They might see Voldemort as a minor annoyance. Or maybe a tool to weaken the Imperium for their own purposes. It's hard to say.
So we've got this huge galactic war brewing. Chaos, the Imperium, Eldar, orcs, maybe even the Necrons. It's a chaotic mess. What happens to Harry in all of this?
Harry, he'd be right in the thick of it. He becomes a symbol of hope, the one fighting against this tide of darkness. It wouldn't just be about him anymore. It'd be about saving the galaxy.
So not just a boy wizard anymore. He'd be a leader, a warrior.
All of the above. Imagine that final confrontation, not in Hogwarts, but on some war-torn planet. Warp energy tearing the sky apart, armies clashing, demons everywhere.
That's intense.
And Harry, no longer a boy, but a hardened veteran, standing against a chaos-empowered Voldemort. The fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance.
That's a story I'd watch. But it's more than just a fight, right? It's about the struggle between hope and despair, order and chaos.
Yeah.
Big stuff.
Exactly. It makes you think, doesn't it? Could Harry, even in this grim, dark future, stay true to himself? Or would the horrors of war change him?
Deep questions. It's amazing how taking Harry Potter and dropping him into Warhammer 40K just opens up all these possibilities.
It really does, and that's what's so great about these kinds of thought experiments. We've only scratched the surface, but hopefully it's got everyone thinking, what would I do in Harry's place?
That's the beauty of it. It's not about the answers, it's about the questions. So what path would you choose in this grim, unforgiving galaxy? Think about it. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there's only war. And a whole lot of magical what-ifs.